Trump cabinet taking shape.
I, Jeff Sessions, do solemnly swear.
The president calls Attorney General Jeff Sessions a man of integrity and principle.
What's the future of the contraceptive mandate? The debate in the Senate today may have a major impact on that question. I'm Jason Calvi. I'll have that story coming up.
Boy Scout transgender policy. We take a look at how faith-based groups are providing an alternative. And no women, no harmony.
Non sarebbe così bello.
The Holy Father touts the fairer sex on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, February 9th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. A group of European countries is challenging President Trump's pro-life policies. The nations are pledging millions of dollars to support organizations that provide birth control and fund abortions abroad. White House correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports.
Lauren, a high-ranking official in Denmark is calling on fellow Europeans to fund international groups that perform abortions in developing countries. Denmark is one of 3 countries attempting to make up for the president's ban on U.S. funding for abortions abroad. Belgium is spearheading the effort, and the Netherlands is also on board. Together, the 3 countries have committed to a combined 30 million euros, or about $32 million. They're organizing an international conference in Brussels set to begin March the 2nd. Belgium will host the meeting to support a global funding initiative called She Decides. The group aims to finance birth control, abortion, and sex education for women, many in developing countries. The move is a response to President Trump's executive order last month reinstating the so-called Mexico City policy. It bans U.S. funding for international groups that perform abortions or even provide information about them. One pro-life international group, CFAM, is not surprised Europeans are mobilizing.
We saw this before when it was enacted under the Bush administration, that the Europeans stepped in. And in fact, it vindicates the whole reason for the Mexico City policy. And that is that American taxpayers should not be paying for something that they don't believe in.
Susan Yoshihara says the fight over abortion funding has also exposed another issue. She says the United Nations has no mandate to promote abortion, but is doing just that. Lauren?
How has the Mexico City policy changed over the years, Wyatt?
After President Reagan implemented it in 1984, other Republican presidents have supported it while Democratic presidents have overturned it, so it changes with each shift in political power. Lauren?
Thank you, Wyatt. On Saturday, look for demonstrations outside Planned Parenthood centers around the country. The hashtag #DefundPP rallies are scheduled outside more than 200 clinics in 44 states. Pro-lifers are showing their support for a Republican plan to prevent tax money from going to the nation's largest abortion provider. President Trump's pick for Attorney General is sworn in. Jeff Sessions was the first sitting U.S. Senator to endorse then-candidate Trump during the campaign. He received high praise from the president today.
He's a man of integrity, a man of principle, and a man of total, utter resolve.
We will defend the laws of this country as passed by Congress. We'll defend the lawful orders of the President of the United States with vigor and determination.
Attorney General Sessions met with his new staff this afternoon. The future of the HHS contraceptive mandate hangs in the balance tonight. The Senate is fighting over the confirmation of a cabinet member who could help kill it. That's Congressman Tom Price, Donald Trump's pick to lead the Health and Human Services Department. Let's go to correspondent Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. Jason.
Warren, Georgia Congressman Tom Price has said the contraceptive mandate violates the right to religious freedom. It forces most employers to provide employee health coverage of contraception, sterilization, and abortion-inducing drugs. If confirmed, Price will actually be able to do something about it.
Dr. Tom Price is a 7-term congressman with a 100% pro-life voting record.
He has co-sponsored an extreme personhood bill, so-called, that would establish that life begins at conception.
He has advocated for defunding Planned Parenthood.
And Price has long pushed to dismantle Obamacare, including its contraceptive mandate.
For our clients, I think it's going to mean that there are freedom is going to be restored.
Christian law firm Alliance Defending Freedom has filed some of the 56 lawsuits against that mandate. Attorney Casey Maddox is hopeful Price will bring change.
We've seen 8 years of an Obama administration that's been driving a really extreme agenda. He fully understands how important it is to make sure that rights of conscience are protected.
The Little Sisters of the Poor and EWTN have fought the mandate.
The burden is the burden on our conscience.
And 20 of the nation's attorneys general supported the sisters, whose case went all the way to the Supreme Court. Alabama's Luther Strange is one of them.
I'm particularly interested in this case because EWTN is headquartered very close to where I grew up and where I live in Alabama. So I know the good work that they do in all religious nonprofits. And what we're dealing with is the aftermath, the effects of the Obamacare legislation that is forcing people with strongly held religious beliefs to do things that would violate those beliefs.
And now Strange will be one of the people to vote on Price's future. Just a few hours ago, he was sworn in to replace outgoing Senator Jeff Sessions, now our country's Attorney General. Lauren?
And is our new country's Attorney General going to have anything to do with this mandate?
Attorney General Sessions may play an important role in the battle against the mandate. In his new role, he could decide to settle all of the legal cases challenging the rule.
All right, Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Jason. Joining us now is Ed Heiselmeyer, Senior Research Fellow in Health Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Thank you for joining us, Ed.
Thanks for having me.
How is this repeal going to play out? We're seeing Price as a key person to do this, but it's a very complicated process, which is why we brought you here to help uncomplicate it.
The first thing to understand about this is the original legislation gave the executive branch, particularly HHS, but some other departments like Treasury and Labor, a lot of authority to write the details and the rules. So now you have a new administration. They can go in, they can repeal them, they can rewrite them, etc. This is an example of one where the new administration can go in and rewrite the regulations and the rules.
But how can you repeal Obamacare before you have a plan to replace it?
Well, you don't have to replace every last piece of it. In fact, that's
of course,
part of
that's what people want, right?
People wanted to get rid of a lot of it. So there's a lot of it that can be changed. The other thing is you can change how the program operates. So we have seen in regulation, we've seen a lot of cost increases and damage done to the market, people who buy their own insurance. You can start to change some of that administratively. That's what Secretary Price, when he's confirmed, will be able to do.
That's the first thing he'll do.
That's right. Congress needs to act on the underlying law. The first thing to do is to repeal some of the key portions of the law that they can do through what's called a budget process.
And what would those be?
A lot of the extra spending and taxes, because it's a budget process. So anything that really is mainly about taxes and spending, you could actually tackle in that. Then Congress would need to come back and probably do several more later.
I know that
getting other aspects.
Right. I know Donald Trump in the beginning said first 100 days repeal Obamacare, and now has come out to say 2018 because I think it takes a lot.
I don't think you have to wait that long. I mean, and certainly the first part. Look, in the first part, Congress already passed last go round in the 2015 budget cycle really a dry run of this, where they got the votes in the House, they got the votes in the Senate, they passed it, and they sent it to President Obama, who of course vetoed it.
Right.
So what we're saying is, look, you take that as your starting
structure,
point. Now, yeah, you have to change some of the effective dates and things like that, but yeah.
But what I want to know is about the substance now, the conscience rights portion of these issues like the HHS mandate.
That is actually something the administration can tackle. And that's interesting because you don't have to wait for Congress to weigh in on that. The way the law was written, it allowed HHS to add these things in as requirements, and HHS picked contraceptives as one of the additional requirements they were going to add in. So interestingly enough, it's actually done in a way, and this is something people don't realize, that you don't even have to go through a formal regulation process because they didn't do that when they put it in there.
So all you have to do is?
You could just take it down from the website and edit it and put it back.
And that's it? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally,
it's
we've had this huge fight over that. That would actually be one way to do it.
All right, thank you so much, Ed Heiselmeyer with the Heritage Foundation.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you joining us. President Trump tells airline executives he wants airports to provide the best service with minimal delays.
We want to help you realize these goals by rolling back burdensome regulations, and you people are regulated probably as much as almost anybody, although I can think of a couple of industries that are even worse.
The president says airline systems are out of whack and says the Federal Aviation Administration should be headed by a pilot. The president is also focusing on the Middle East. The White House says he made a series of calls today to leaders in Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq, and Afghanistan. The White House says he's rallying support in the fight against ISIS.
Our NATO allies.
The top U.S. commander in Afghanistan says he needs more troops. General John Nicholson testified today before the Senate Armed Services Committee. He says extra forces are needed to train and advise the Afghan military and replace contractors who cost more. General Nicholson also complains that Russian meddling is hindering the war on terror. Florida Senator Marco Rubio says Russian President Vladimir Putin has the most power ever seen in Moscow since dictator Joseph Stalin. He's warning the U.S. about partnering with Russia to fight ISIS.
The other risk at that, of course, is the way he claims to fight terrorists is by bombing civilian populations. So if we are in partnership with him fighting ISIS and he kills a bunch of children and bombs a hospital in Aleppo, that's on us too, because we are in partnership with them.
Senator Rubio also says teaming up with Russia to fight ISIS in exchange for lifting sanctions is a fantasy and borderline immoral. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering. In today's world, a judge in Kenya rules its government doesn't have the right to shut down the world's largest refugee camp. The court says closing the camp would violate Kenya's constitution and send more than 200,000 back to war-torn Somalia. The UN Refugee Agency is applauding the High Court's decision, but the Kenyan government is concerned. It says the camp has become a base for the terror group Al-Shabaab. A Catholic leader in Jerusalem is criticizing a new Israeli law. It legalizes Israeli settlements built on Palestinian property. And Bishop William Shomali says the law isn't just and makes the so-called two-state solution almost impossible. The Trump administration has not commented on the law. Keeping the peace, that's what Pope Francis says he's trying to do. The Holy Father met with writers of a Jesuit magazine today at the Vatican. The publication was founded in 1850 and is the only Catholic publication to be personally reviewed by the Holy See's Secretariat of State. Pope Francis spoke to the group about the wide range of topics, including child abuse and corruption in the Vatican. Elise Harris, Rome correspondent for our sister organization, Catholic News Agency, joins us. Elise, in the excerpts from the Pope's Q&A with religious superiors, he says very plainly, there is corruption in the Vatican. How is he responding?
Pope Francis is responding by saying something that he has oftentimes before, that he's trying not to let anything take away his interior peace. He said before the conclave that elected him, everyone was talking about reform. Everyone knew that it needed to happen. And so what he's doing now and what he's concentrating on now is really trying to maintain a sense of peace that he's had from the beginning.
Elise, what was Pope Francis's advice to the superiors when he asked about handling cases of sexual abuse in their congregation?
You know, he really hit on some critical points, the first of which was to remember that abusers are often victims of abuse themselves, and that when we see consecrated persons doing these things, it really is the devil trying to get in there and destroy the good work the Lord is doing. But the Pope also brought up the importance of remembering that this is a disease, that sin is involved, but it's also an illness. And we have to be very careful when vetting new candidates for consecrated life, especially if they've been rejected from another community before.
What did he say his secret is for remaining peaceful? He certainly covered a lot of topics here, despite some very public resistance that he faces.
You know, Pope Francis brought out his sense of humor, saying that he doesn't need tranquilizers to keep his peace, but his secret is actually St. Joseph. He has a little statue of a sleeping St. Joseph in his room. Whenever he has a problem, he writes it down and puts it under that statue so that St. Joseph can sleep on it and not him. So he said that's kind of his secret, as well as a solid life of prayer with the rosary and Mass.
All right, Elise Harris, Rome correspondent, Catholic News Agency, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Lauren.
The Holy Father also has a message for Catholic educators. Be builders of a more united and peaceful world. Francis spoke to the Congregation for Catholic Education at the Vatican this morning, and he says there are many forms of violence, poverty, and discrimination in the world. And Catholic schools need to be on the front line, creating dialogue to help change that. Coming up, is sports taking the place of religion? We talk to our panel of experts. More than 111 million people watched the Super Bowl on Sunday, and as we reported, Pope Francis even sent a video message. Let's take a look.
Al participar del deporte, somos capaces de ir más allá del propio interés personal.
And that got me thinking, is the rise of sports with our culture a sign of the secularization of the larger society? Joining us now is Chad Pecknold, Associate Professor with Catholic University, and sports agent Doug Eldridge, who is Managing Partner with DLE Agency. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
I'm not a really big sports fan, but this got me thinking. It really did. And the message that was played, Chad, to 70,000 people inside the stadium, isn't there some irony about this here? Sports are becoming more of a spectacle, more prevalent, but new American religion in attendance is going down.
Well, it's interesting, Lauren. We hear these stories about a kind of post-Christian America,
right,
kind of decline, Pew studies, etc. And yet here we are at the largest sporting event in the American year, and the Pope's speaking.
Okay, but I would say that's an anomaly, right? And Doug, where do you think religion fits into sports? Do you agree with this premise that maybe sports is becoming our new religion?
I would never equate the two, because clearly they're not on the same level.
Clearly.
But I would say, as I've said to you before, sports and within it athletics and athletes have a larger place and platform in American society than they ever have in history. And religion is inextricably intertwined into the daily life and practices of these athletes. So by extension, I believe it's a positive for religion that these athletes are bringing that message to the field, to the court, to the track, and with it, these stadiums of 70 and 80,000 fans.
So is there, I'm asking, I'm not supposing here, any information that shows that people, the more sports oriented they are, the more they spend Sundays with football, the less they go to church?
I mean, in a sense, what you see in football are the kind of standard views that the church holds about learning virtues, acquiring virtue, training, discipline around a common end. That's how we learn natural virtues, and that fits together with the faith. The faith elevates our natural virtues and directs them towards God, and so they're not in competition with each other. They can become, but if they become in competition with each other, if sports somehow become someone's church, you're kind of disordering sports.
Well, but Doug, Tom Brady and his mother are praying. You've got people, Tim Tebow, who's very religious. But what about the ones you don't hear about? I'm trying to find a hook here and really explore this. Is it that there are few examples of people who are very devout and the rest not so much within the community?
I think it is literally underfoot, and you don't have to trip over it to know that it's there. So many of our clients, and I'm so fortunate to represent the broader religious spectrum in terms of our client base, from Catholic to Christian to Muslim to Jew, and irrespective of their denomination, the singular point of commonality that they all share is the devout practice of their faith. And I would be the first to tell you, though, that even on Sundays with our NFL clients or with our summer and winter Olympians who spend a large portion of the year traveling around the world and can't sit in that second pew, they would be the first to tell you that our faith and our spirituality comes from the inside out. And on the Sundays that we can't be in Mass or can't be in service, we bring the Scripture and we bring our spirituality and we bring our unwavering faith with us. And I would share one small vignette.
Please.
One of our Winter Olympians, Alexa Knierim, a figure skater, they're bound for Pyeongchang here in a year.
Fabulous.
She recently penned that she's gone through some tremendous health challenges, and she recently penned an article and she said, you know what? It was when my body was at its weakest that my faith was at its strongest. And I feel as though that one soundbite is so emblematic of the broader professional sports landscape. You don't need the stalwart Stonehenge examples of the Tim Tebows, who are wonderful representatives. And
that's what I was getting to, is that you have that big example.
It's throughout. It's pervasive.
You do think it's throughout. All right, let's move to the Super Bowl halftime. So maybe you're saying here on the field you have a lot of devout athletes or a lot of religions, but Chad, you just recently wrote an article about Lady Gaga's performance, and let's see if we can put it up here. What is unusual is the way she invokes God's name and even classic Christian themes throughout her performances. But you add this, the spectacle which invokes God's name without thinking very clearly about the truth of the matter. So I think that you're talking about one of the performers at the Super Bowl. If we look at Beyonce last year, we know that that was a very inappropriate for many family audiences.
She blew the power out
halftime
in New Orleans.
right.
I was there for that. The arena was black.
I remember that. I remember that. So my question to you is, where has society gone with this halftime show and all these commercials that are also seemingly very political?
Well, it's interesting because we did see a lot of commercials that were strongly in favor of progressive politics, and it did alienate a lot of people. And I think that's something the sponsors should think about. I think there are negatives to sports, and a lot of the negatives that come from sports have to do with money and generating money, but they also have to do with political ideology. The great thing about sports is it gathers us together around common goods. The bad thing about sports is when the politics that are so divisive come and rip out the ground from beneath you, as Lady Gaga kind of did. She began with a great patriotic open, one nation under God. Right? One nation under God. That's a good thing. That's what the country believes in, is a common good that's ordered to the highest good, namely God. But then comes the performance where we're all about identity politics that's so divisive. And this is something where there's an internal contradiction that just doesn't hang together.
All right. Chad Pecknold, thank you so much, Catholic University. Doug Eldridge, DLE Agency. We could talk about this for a whole segment, a whole half hour. Maybe we'll do that.
Halftime show.
Halftime show. All right. Thank you so much. Up next, the transgender movement spreads to the Boy Scouts. We explore faith-based options for families. And praising the fairer sex.
Di che cosa è capace una donna, eh? È coraggiosa quella, eh?
Wise words about women. A New Jersey child becomes the first openly transgender member of the Boy Scouts 1 week after the organization changed its transgender policy. Mark Irons is here with reaction. Mark?
Lauren, the Boy Scouts of America say their transgender policy won't impact faith-based groups, but some Catholics are speaking out. In a statement, the Archdiocese of St. Louis says it is, quote, saddened and disturbed by the decision of the Boy Scouts of America to allow girls struggling with gender dysphoria into their troops.
In the Archdiocese of St. Louis, the majority of parishes sponsor a Boy Scout troop, but the Scouts' new transgender policy is causing concern.
My biggest aim is what's good for the kids, and this policy does not serve youth. It doesn't help them grow as young men of God, help them understand their identity and the way they were created.
The U.S. Catholic Church formed a partnership with the Boy Scouts of America in 1933. It eventually became known as the National Catholic Committee on Scouting. In response to the new transgender guideline, that committee says in a statement, quote, this change by the Boy Scouts of America has no impact on the operation and program delivery of scouting programs in Catholic chartered units.
At the risk of throwing the National Catholic Committee on Scouting under the bus, I thought their statement was a little weak. And I think that as Catholics, we really need to get out in front on this issue, and I think we've been battling from behind for too long.
Boys and young men need a call to something greater than themselves.
Some Christians looking for alternatives have turned to Trail Life USA, founded in 2014. The group is similar to the Boy Scouts, but leaders say it's notably different in its approach to transgender youth.
And these young boys need our care, they need concern, they need help, they need counseling. They don't need to be encouraged and promoted and facilitated in this kind of a thought which is really delusional.
St. Raymond's Parish in Springfield, Virginia has a Catholic chapter of Trail Life. Vince Droulard volunteers with the group and his sons are members.
At our summer camps, we have Mass every day. We pray the rosary at the campfire and our monthly outings for our campouts. And we talk about the virtues and the saints and basically just integrate the faith into everything we're doing.
Vince says the group has learned a lot from the Boy Scouts, which celebrate 107 years this week. But for him, it's the focus on Christ that will keep Trail Life thriving in the years ahead.
Vince is from the Diocese of Arlington in Virginia, where nearly half of the parishes run Boy Scout units. Bishop Michael Burbidge of that diocese spoke to the Scouts at a recent Mass. He told them, quote, you live in a world that tries to define you. What never changes is who you really are. Lauren?
That is very true, Mark. Thank you so much, Mark Irons. That was a great piece. Without women, there is no harmony in the world. I can't say I disagree with what Pope Francis had to say today during his morning homily.
Non sarebbe così bello.
Holy Father is refocusing on creation, saying women make the world a beautiful place. He adds God created women so that we would all have a mother. The readings at Mass this week are from the book of Genesis. That does it for us. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Don't forget you can see every broadcast of the show on EWTN's YouTube channel. I'll see you again tomorrow. And we are going to leave you with, take a look at this, the pictures of the storm barreling across the Northeast. Good night and God bless.